Hey, good morning, guys. Hey, man, am I excited to start this new summer series with you called The Beatitudes with an Attitude. So, today we're going to get started. We're just going to do a brief overview of what the next few weeks are going to be really about. I thought long and hard about this. I just think that we just could use just a reminder of what Jesus was talking about when he was standing on the mountain talking to so many people back then about what it really means to just have an attitude of faith and an attitude of Christianity and an attitude of love. And I just think sometimes we no longer embrace our differences, but we use them to discriminate and to encourage fear with one another. I don't think we take the time to say, hey, you know what? It's awesome that we have differences because it's what makes us unique, But lately, I just feel like we've just used those differences to separate us and to bring fear. And I really think that the Beatitudes really helps to try to bring us together to get us focused on one attitude of just being blessed and to bless others. And so hopefully over the next few weeks, through my ramblings, I'll be able to kind of just help encourage us to live out these attitudes, and to find that when we all live out these attitudes together, and that we're merciful, and that we're humble, and that we're meek, and that when we hunger and thirst for righteousness, that good things can happen. It doesn't divide, it actually unites. Growing up as a child, I was a huge Star Wars fan. And I remember 1977 like it was yesterday. I was a young 7-year-old kid. My mom had taken me to see this movie that wasn't really highly acclaimed. The critics say it was going to bomb. It was terrible. How can you have, a Star Wars, a space soap opera per se? But I just remember sitting in the theater, and the door opened, and out steps Vader, in which really began just a 42-year love affair with this guy. I mean, this guy, he was good, went to bad, was deceived, was tricked, but ultimately, as we all know, he found himself again. And that's really what I hope we can do here, that if we're feeling like we're lost or we're struggling with stuff, that we can just, through God and through faith and through working out these Beatitudes, that we can just find ourselves again, and find our community again, and find just joy with each other again. I remember a short time into the movie, Obi-Wan Kenobi was talking to a young Luke Skywalker about the Force, and Skywalker was like, "What is the Force? What are you talking about?" And Obi-Wan goes on to explain that this Force is this power in this universe that binds us all together, that flows through us. I didn't think much of it being struck by Darth Vader. I was obviously just in awe of that, and I know the Force is fictional, but the concept of something binding us together is real. Many times in Jesus' life, he brought together to show them that though many, we are all one in the love of God. And one of the times that I cling to help me see people through God's eyes is Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, when he gives out the we call them the Beatitudes, but he calls them the blessed. And I just like to read through them, just to kind of give an overview. I'd like to go through each one of these over the next few weeks, just kind of break them down, see how we can incorporate them in our own lives, into the lives of others, into our communities, into just into the world. He starts off, he says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of God. You know, blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. So because the prophets before you were persecuted, I will be persecuted. Jesus says, if they hate you, don't fear, because they hated me first. You know, I find it very interesting that Jesus uses these characteristics. These go they go in absolute opposition to the way the religious rulers thought the path to heaven was back then. They thought that self-awareness was through ritual was the way. They thought living by the law. They thought that if they walked a certain way, looked a certain way, talked a certain way, that God would be impressed and they would make it to heaven. But Jesus came and said that is not the way. He said, I am the way. Oftentimes I loved hearing Jesus in the Bible say, you have heard, but now I say. And that's what got Jesus in a lot of trouble, is because he knew that the law could not save anybody. He knew that the law could not fulfill people and fulfill their lives. So he came to fulfill the law himself by living a perfect life and allowing all of that weight to be put on him so that we didn't have to try to measure up to anything. And so Jesus, it's just cool that he just totally went against everything that the religious zealots stood for. So as hopefully as we learn in the next coming weeks, that these guys who thought that they were just right as rain were just as wrong as a door in a submarine. Got a little humor in there. I know that this sermon has been this concept has been sermoned to death, but what I want to focus on is that he always started with blessed are. To me, that means that God sees us as equal opportunities to live out those wonderful beatitudes. He didn't say, blessed are those who have been, but those who are. I believe that God always wants us to be and not to wait. When living out my faith becomes less than a blessed attitude, and yes, we all struggle. I struggle daily sometimes with living out my faith and being courageous and being any one of those attitudes. I try to picture Jesus' view as he looked out on the thousands of people that most considered only worthy of the attitude of exclusion. Because a lot of people that followed Jesus back then were probably the ones in the community where the religious zealots have just written them off and have just degraded them so much that they didn't even feel worthy. I mean, they just, struggled. And Jesus felt so much love for each and every one of them. His love was the binding force that brought them to that hillside that day, not judgment. They felt something with Jesus. They heard something about Jesus. He lived out all the attitudes. Jesus wasn't this guy that was, struggling with stuff and said, hey, this is what you need to go do. This is what Jesus says we all need to do together. And he lived that out in his life. He lived every one of the Beatitudes in his life. If we talk about Jesus being, love and all this and this and this and this, and yep, he's absolutely all that. But I also feel like he when he gave the Beatitudes, he wasn't giving us a checklist. I don't believe he was giving a checklist and saying you have to be all this stuff. Yes, it's great that we strive to do this, but I think he was giving a piece of his personality and himself to the people in that crowd that day. Because if you think about it, Jesus was poor in spirit. I mean, He mourned. You know, he was meek. He hungered and thirsted for righteousness. He was merciful. He was pure in heart. He was a peacemaker. You know, he was persecuted for his righteousness. He was cast out to the point of death. You know, he was the salt of the earth. You know, he was all those things, and instead of saying on that hill, I'm glad you guys are here, but you know, just like all the religious zealots tell you, you're not worthy enough. He didn't say that. He said, here, take a piece of me. Allow me to give a piece of myself to you, that you may go out and do greater things than I have done. You know, I remember a scene, you know, judgment says that we are not worthy to be blessed, not worthy to feel loved, not worthy to be. Judgment states that we are only worthy of our broken vision. So when we judge people and we're not merciful and we're not humble and we're not meek, and we look at people without looking through the lens of these attitudes, it says that they're only worthy of our broken vision, and it just sets just a situation and sometimes a lifetime of regret and sadness and separation, and it's just, God came to get rid of all of that. He came to fix our glasses, you know. So we can see things clearly. Things that we thought one way become the same but different. You know, we look at people, the same people, differently when we can walk through these attitudes, and we can walk through what God is really truly trying to teach us in these attitudes and in this moment on the mountain. I just think it was just, I could just imagine what the people on the mountain were thinking, you know, about humble and merciful. You know, how many of them were thinking about the Pharisees and the Sadducees in the temple, you know, praying and doing all this stuff, and you know, none of them were humble, as we'll see going into this series. Not very many of them were merciful. Not very many of them hungered after righteousness, their own righteousness, but not the true righteousness that brings us into a brotherhood relationship with Jesus. You know, I remember another scene in the first Star Wars that kind of just helps me to think of this, is because sometimes we look at people and we judge them and don't think that they have much use. And I think a lot of the religious zealots looked at people and looked at that they didn't dress like them, didn't look like them, didn't talk like them, didn't have the knowledge that they had. So they used that to predetermine people. And sometimes I think we do that too. Sometimes I think we predetermine people in our own walks, and we decide, you know, if they don't look like me, talk like me, walk like me, act like me, then they're worthy to be judged and worthy to not be loved and to be accepted and to be brought into this community together. And Jesus spent so much of his life trying to break that lie and saying we are all one church. It says in the Bible, it says though we are many parts, we are one church. And Jesus looks down and just loves us all equally, unconditional. I remember the scene where Luke first encounters Yoda. That's a fun scene. You know, he's this little green person rummaging through his stuff. And of course, at first glance, Yoda couldn't see that he was a master Jedi. Even when Luke discovered who Yoda was, he still thought he was too small to hold such a great power through the Force. And sometimes I just feel like in our own lives, we feel like we've just, you know, been through too much or have been told too much of a lie that these attitudes, these Beatitudes, we can't walk through those. We can't attain those. We can't do those. We're not worthy of all of that, but we are. And when we start to realize that we are worthy of being humble and being merciful and being thirsty after righteousness and and then God's opened the door through his son Jesus for us to get through those and to run to those and to accept those, then when we realize that no matter where we're at in our lives, we are worthy to have that power in us to feel God's love, you know. Then the X-Wing scene came. Luke, everybody remembers this. If you're a Star Wars fan, you remember this. Luke is trying to raise the X-Wing. He's felt a little bit of the Force, and now he thinks, I'm good now. I'm a master Jedi. And so he's struggling, and it comes up out of the water a little bit, and then it sinks back down into the water. And he sits down and he gives up. He says, "It's no use. I can't do it. It's just too hard. It's just too much." And I think, as Yoda will prove here in just a second, I think Jesus proved the same way when we see something that needs mercy and we say, "Oh, I don't want to give mercy," or we see something where we need to be, "Oh, I don't want to be humble," or "I don't want to be thirsty. I don't want to, show love and mercy in this moment." Yoda in this moment showed that no matter what people thought of him or think of us, we still have that moment to shine and let God's love shine through us, because we all know what happened. Yoda closes his eyes, puts his two little fingers up. Luke's over there pouting, and all of a sudden Luke looks over, and he couldn't believe it. This little who he thought was just a nobody, couldn't do this, couldn't have this. Are you serious? He can't do this. He's just a little guy. I'm a big guy. He's a little guy. What? Luke was just caught up in his preconceived notions of what a Jedi Master should look like. And sometimes I think that's really what Jesus was really, I think what saddened him back in those days is the Jewish people thought that Jesus was going to be just this big general, this big army, that he was going to come in and just wipe out the Romans, and he was going to set them free. And Jesus didn't show up on the scene like that. He showed up as a humble carpenter, who just had love for people, and they couldn't wrap their brain around it. And I think here Luke is experiencing some of that same emotion, that he's looking at this little bitty 3-foot dude thinking, this guy can't do nothing. He can't raise the X-Wing out. But as we know, out come the X-Wing, and he rested it on dry land. And I love Luke's expression was priceless. He was like, he finally got it. He finally realized, no matter how insignificant people make us feel, no matter how small we think we are, through the power of Christ, we can attain anything. And so it's just great that at this point he begins to realize that it's not about the strength of someone, but about the depth of faith which binds us all. In our case, that would be the love of God. If we have faith like a mustard seed, we can move mountains. Jesus said that. We don't have to go work out in the gym every day. We don't have to pump up ourselves. We could just have faith of a mustard seed. And Jesus said the mountain will be moved and cast into the ocean. I just like to find God's love through just different things in my life today, I see the love of God through the eyes of my little grandchildren. The little they are, but mighty in their love for us. When I look at my grandkids and they look up at me, it's just amazing, because it's just blessed. Blessed are those, When we look up to Jesus, I feel like that's the way he sees us looking up at him. And that's why he gives us those attitudes, is because it's really a piece of him that he's giving us to help walk through this world together. This journey was never meant to be alone. Jesus didn't walk it alone. He went and got 12 guys and spent 3 years with them. He could have just walked alone by himself. He could have just went town to town to town to town. But he knew how much fellowship was, and he knew how much we can learn when we fellowship with each other and we share ideas, and we can learn in our Christian community how to be merciful with each other, how to be humble with each other, how to help each other become hungry and thirsty for righteousness. And hopefully, like I said, through these next few weeks, I hope just through my thoughts and talks that we can hopefully just find some common ground with each other through these attitudes and learn to practice these with each other and if there's moments where we can exercise these with each other, then it just becomes second nature. Then we become more like Jesus, and then when the rough stuff comes, then it'll be easier to go to these attitudes instead of the worldly attitudes. I see God's mighty binding love in the act of those who choose to stand up and hold a door for an elderly woman. Blessed are they. I see the love of God when someone has been diagnosed with cancer or any other illness and others rally around them. I've seen that in my own life. I see that in the lives of my friends that are going through stuff. I see love, God's love in an older couple holding hands. I always tell my wife, I said, I can't wait till I'm 80 and I get to hold your hand still. I mean, it's just wonderful. And to think what their hands have had to hold on tight to through the course of their marriage. What have they had to hold on to? How many times have they had to execute the blessed are, even if you're not have faith, even if you don't know who Jesus is. If we walk out these attitudes just in life, oh my gosh, how many situations would be so much more? How much more love would we show in this world instead of things? We should always remember. I'm going to close with this, and I thank you for tuning in. And just like I said, just if you'd like, go over to YouTube, type up Hillside TV, subscribe to the channel, follow us, and just I hope I can just bless you guys as much as every one of you out there has blessed me in my walk. And we just love each other. We should always remember that, like the Force in the Star Wars, there is a power that draws us all together, that binds us in one, that says, blessed are they. So have a great weekend. It's supposed to be a nice one. Just tune in again next week as we begin to work through the Beatitudes, and we're going to look at those who are poor in spirit, and for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. What does that mean? Does that mean that if we're poor, that one day the kingdom of heaven is theirs? I don't think so. I think that means that the kingdom of heaven is here, and we get to be part of that now. So we're going to go through that next week. I love you guys. Thanks for watching here at Hillside. You guys have a great day.